Welcome to a full house for question time, an hour of free and frank discussion. And boy, did Dorothy Byrne set a high bar for free and frank discussion last night. Absolutely delighted to have a stellar panel. Sharon White, who is the CEO of Ofcom, soon to take the helm at the store that is never knowingly undersold. Damian Collins MP, Chair of Culture, Media and Sport Committee, who wrote in the Times on the 6th of June, "Only Boris Johnson can restore trust and excitement in our politics." Luisa Omielan, a comedian appearing at the Fringe, soon to be doing a run in New York. Her Politics for Bitches show on BBC Three, funnily enough, did not feature either interviews with Bojo or Jezza. Patrick Holland, controller of BBC Two, responsible for strategy on BBC Two, said that television is being watched by older, posher people. But he also says that where the channel is alive with eclectic and creative voices, so why are young people not watching? Sara, Geater, Chair of PACT and the Chief Operating Officer of All Three Media. This is a company that's headed up by incredible women. So maybe Kevin Ligo should go along for a bit of work experience. So before we begin, of course, there are questions on the app, but you know, we are people in communications and we're not that tech literate sometimes. So we're going to actually ask for real live hands up with real live questions during the whole hour. So without further ado, let's take the first question, and it's from Ruth Pitt. Your question, please.
Dorothy Byrne used the McTaggart lecture last night to suggest that in the service of democracy, politicians, including Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn, should be called out as liars or cowards if they tell us untruths or refuse interviews. Does the panel agree?
Thank you very much. Damian Collins, do you recognise that description of liars and cowards?
No, certainly not with regards to the Prime Minister, absolutely not. I agree with her that if politicians are lying in an interview, they should be called out for it. I think my committee's done a lot of work looking at fake news and disinformation. If we think that politicians are saying things that aren't true, I don't think we should be frightened of challenging them in that way in live interviews and say, look, your facts are wrong, what you're saying is not wrong. And I think sometimes people are let off the hook.
So you're saying that Boris Johnson has never lied?
Well, so politicians say things that other people disagree with. I don't think that is lying. I think that is debate. You know, so I mean, I thought the most topical thing that comes up in this category is obviously things like what was written on the side of the bus during the referendum, for example, as if that passed off without comment at the time, as if at the time people just readily accepted those slogans and those facts and never questioned them.
Did any? I'm just quite interested in this because I don't actually remember Conservative MPs during that referendum campaign going, "That's a lie."
Yeah, well, I do. That's probably one of them. Because we contested the facts. There was a very hot debate about it. So people said, well, those figures aren't right. It was debated extensively in interviews at the time, and people, were part of that debate. Voters saw that debate before they cast their votes. That's part of politics. Politicians can select different statistics, different quotes to support an argument they're making, just as journalists can do, and other people can challenge it and question it. As long as that's based on fact and is part of a debate, I think that is part of a robust debate. Where someone is saying something which is just plainly not true at all, then they should be challenged on that in interviews, and I agree with Dorothy about that.
Dorothy also talked, she gave some brilliant statistics. She talked about trust in politicians, Patrick, being 19%. Trust in terrestrial television, 71%. So therefore, on that question of liars and cowards, do you think, you can only talk about the BBC, but do you think the BBC is too craven to politicians?
I think that if you look at the Today programme, if you look at the...
what, you mean the knitting shop in Bournemouth?
Knitting shop in Bournemouth. I think that image...
Actually, Dorothy was speaking to John Humphreys this morning from that knitting shop in Bournemouth.
That image will stay with me a long time. But on Newsnight, on the Today programme, then asking politicians to appear and then calling them out if their invitation has not been accepted is a really, really important part
Yeah, but if that was the case, we'd be doing that in Newsnight about Corbyn and Boris Johnson every freaking night.
Absolutely, but we do need to, I do think that surfacing that so that the audience understand that that process is ongoing and that the role of the BBC, the role of the news media in general, in general is, of course, to be holding politicians to account, to be calling out if there are untruths, to be calling them out. And I think that the fact-checking services that the BBC is offering, that other news services are offering, are absolutely essential.
So do you think actually you're saying we should be much more vocal all the time when politicians turn us down for what are not reasonable reasons?
I think that the audience
Because it's about sustained questioning, isn't it?
It is, but the audience need to know that this is an ongoing dialogue between the media and the political classes. And if they're not, then you get the separation between the two, and then you get a direct to voter communication that misses out the interrogation and the scrutiny of the news media.
It's interesting because I mean, Dorothy is just so kind of brilliantly outspoken. Do you think any BBC executive could be given that speech? Just asking.
I mean, Dorothy is. I had the pleasure of a long time ago, and also I still am quite scared of the memories of working with Dorothy when I was a researcher at The Big Story 2020, a long time ago. So she is formidable. She is forensic, and she has always been someone who's just been such a brilliant champion for journalism and for...
and could a BBC executive have given that speech?
What I was going to get to is that she's she has got an extraordinarily long view on her career, so that she is uniquely placed to do that.
Ooh. Did you do a law degree? Sharon, you're almost off the hook at Ofcom. You're almost free to talk freely. Was Dorothy right to call out both Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn as liars and cowards?
Yeah, that was really interesting. The pictures yesterday of Margaret Thatcher. I don't know how many people watched the Margaret Thatcher documentary, which was my sort of my history growing up. She became Prime Minister was 1979. Was that reminder of the 45-minute interviews with politicians, which feels like it's a lifetime ago. And I mean, I sort of agree a bit with Damian on this. One of the things we're finding, we're doing a big review into news, actually into the BBC's news and current affairs output and other broadcasters. And the big issues that come up are around trust and accuracy. And although TV news is still more trusted, obviously, than the news that comes from social media and some of the stats that Dorothy put up last night, there is a real question about the depth and investigative nature of news coverage. And I think that's partly whether politicians are prepared to come forward and prepared to put themselves up for scrutiny. But there's also a question, I think, about whether the quality of journalism is always as strong as it might be. We've been running lots and lots of focus groups up and down the country, and you can see different groups pointing to what they see as great journalism, where there's been great research, great analysis, great calling out, and other examples where, to be frank, it's almost as though, the press release is being recorded and imbibed. And so we will, before I move to Never Known Undersold, come out at the end of this year, I think, with some really interesting and quite difficult pointers, I think, for the industry.
Well, can you give us a quick headline on what they might be?
I think issues around accuracy, trust, research, the in-depth nature of news and current affairs coverage, and more consistent, high-quality, Kirsty Wark style journalism.
But do you think on that point, I mean, it's not Ofcom's job to look at budgets and things, but do you think that because, we all know that there is a press on budgets, that actually that part of television should be better resourced? Because I tell you, it's not that well resourced at the moment.
I mean, as you say, the question about budgets is for the individual broadcast business. But if you look at, actually, even if you just look at the BBC, the amount of money that is going to news and current affairs, say, compared to, obviously, to newspapers where there's been more of a decline, I mean, there's still substantial resourcing. So I think the question about, as I say, it's the depth and forensic nature of the coverage as much, I think, as the politicians.
And you've got teenage kids, so there's no question. I mean, I think that whole area of teenagers are actually incredibly interested in politics now and more in-depth stuff.
They are incredibly interested, and they are both watching, taking in a huge amount of news from social media, while at the same time recognising that they don't trust it. And so we've got this sort of incredibly sort of paradoxical evidence at the moment. They're taking huge amounts in from Facebook, but they don't know what to trust, and yet they're not watching TV news, which is the broader terrestrial TV challenge.
Well, Luisa, Omielan, you were absolutely tasked with getting hold of that younger audience, really, in your BBC Three Politics for Bitches. Yeah. First of all, you didn't get an interview with Boris, and
it's not my job to. I didn't want to. That's not for me what politics is about. And it's really interesting that actually the question that you're proposing is, why are we criticising this woman who's had a long career, that's proven herself, that's done incredible things, because she suggested that these politicians should be held to account for the stuff that they've said that has since been proven to be inaccurate? Why are we questioning her and her value and her worth, rather than going for why are they getting away with saying all this shit all the time, again and again and again?
Oh, we're not questioning Dorothy. I mean, we're absolutely...
No, but you are, because you're saying, was Dorothy right to say this? Rather than saying, why aren't they being attacked? Why is it always like a way round things, rather than just being really specific and to the point? And for me, my point with the politics for show, I don't care for Boris Johnson or the names or all of them. For me, I wanted my audience to see, what are you working so hard for? Why can't you afford to buy your own place? Why can't you afford to have childcare? Why do you have to make a decision between having a baby or not having a baby, or going to work or doing these things, or being able to afford rent? Why is it that if you've been paying taxes your entire lives, that you can go to a doctor and get sent home 12 times and die 7 weeks later in agony when you've paid taxes your entire life? Why is that the case? And you don't know about it until you're in that situation, because you don't realise how important taxes are. Because to you, you're going, I'm just trying to survive and get by. So for me, the programme was going, this is why you're paying taxes. This is where your money is going. And you need to educate and learn about this stuff, rather than this stupid name calling about, oh, well, he's hilarious, look at his hair. No, look at what he's doing with your money, mate. Look at what he's doing with your fucking money. And that's what they need to know. That's what my show was for. Right. And actually, we tried to interview an MP, and he was horrific. So I'm not doing that again. So, yeah.
I like that. It's good. Politics for bitches, but with the politics without the MPs.
Yeah, it was just to be like, what is politics on an everyday that's accessible, because we all should be invested and interested in politics. Yeah. It's for all of us. So that was the.
Sara, just going to say that all three media owned by Liberty and Discovery. Any shortage of sexist bastards there?
What can I say? They're incredibly supportive shareholders.
Just in terms of the whole, the tenor of what Dorothy was saying about what it is like to be on television, running television in the 21st century, do you see a big change? She was talking about older female executives being short on the ground, but actually that has changed. Look at all three media, for example.
Yes.
How does it change things when you're all there together, apart from obviously having your periods together, then going through the menopause together?
Well, you don't get pointed out in meetings, which is helpful. I think, and talking again as a woman who's over 60, who's been in the industry for a long time, it's working, there's obviously Jane's the CEO, I'm the COO, we've got Angela who's the CFO, we've got Louise who runs All Three International. And then we've got a lot of our OpCo leaders are also women. So I think it hasn't been a deliberate policy. It's just been that they've been the best people for the job at that particular time and available. I have to say, I think in HQ, we're not political. Mm-hmm. We speak very openly. We discuss all issues together. Jane, thank God, doesn't mind a level of dissent around the table and stuff like that, which is very useful. So I think there's nothing that we won't talk about, and that's really helpful. I think in terms of encouraging people coming up behind us, we do. And I think that's the important part, is encouraging and not pulling up the drawbridge.
Before we leave the panel on Dorothy's speech, Sharon, Dorothy said, despite 14% of the population being from BAME backgrounds, only 2.2% of programmes are made by BAME directors. I mean, this is something that, you know, Ofcom has been looking at repeatedly.
I have to say, this is always the point at which I hate the term BAME.
Yes.
Because I think sort of lumping colour and heritage and in a very broad way is not very helpful. I mean, I think one of the most interesting things in the last day or so has been how much discussion, including at Dorothy's McTaggart, there has been about diversity and inclusion, but still actually is a very marginal part of what we do. And I shouldn't call this out, but I was at the Amazon session yesterday. I don't know how many people were at Amazon yesterday. Actually, some very sort of compelling discussion about integration and inclusion. And then you look at the scroll, and I think as a black woman, I felt like I was going to basically sort of rescind my Amazon membership because it's a demography that doesn't feel like modern Britain. And I think until we start to think about reflecting modern Britain, because that's just what we do as creatives, rather than special programmes and marginal activities and special writer streams and special director streams, but actually it should be natural for all of us to be thinking about commissioners who look like modern Britain, directors who look like modern Britain, not about giving people a chance as though somehow we don't come to this equally talented. I think we're always going to be stuck in the old conversation.
Let's bring the lights up a bit, because before we go on to the next question, any audience members like to have a comment? Yep, question from over here. Anyone? I can't see. Yep, I think there's a question, a hand up over there, but let's take that question there on the right.
Yeah, so Mark Damitzer suggested earlier this year that we have a reality check correspondent or a stats specialist at the end of Question Time or the Today programme. Do we think that's a good idea, and why isn't that happening?
Patrick.
I think that, you know, it's the role of the host on Question Time to be providing that in a rolling manner in terms of making it feel like, because otherwise it could feel quite dissociated from the different questions. I think that, you know, that may be something that the teams look into, or is something that there is a way in which online that you could then access what that might look like. It might not make for compelling television at the end of the programme if it was just a sort of summary. That's my sort of stock response to it.
Damian.
I agree, actually. I find actually, just thinking about the select committee sessions as well, unless the questioner can actually challenge the person at that moment as the session is taking place, it's always inadequate to have to go back afterwards. And even if afterwards it can be demonstrated, well, that wasn't quite right, the person asking the questions has got to know enough about the answers to be able to spot those mistakes. So I think there is an onus on the presenters for that. But I think it is, I think it is important. I think also, there's a danger. I think maybe the nature of political debate and discussion in interviews has become broken, that they've become sessions which largely throw out more heat than light on issues. The person coming in to do the interview feels they're not going to have the chance to talk about the thing they want to talk about. And the questioner hasn't got enough time to follow up on the things they want to follow up on, because they've got to move on to the next thing. And I just think it's, in many cases, become an inadequate forum.
Well, that's interesting, because actually what often politicians will do is they don't want to come on for sustained questioning. They actually would prefer to have a quick couple of minutes. Actually, it's much less attractive to them to be forensically interviewed for something like 8 to 10 to 12 minutes. And do you actually believe that, for example, the whole of the cabinet, which we find very hard to get at the moment, funnily enough, should actually be prepared to come on for sustained questioning?
Yes, and I think there's a conversation to be had. I think to say, well, if you're a cabinet minister who's got some new initiative, something you're launching, you can come on. You'll have time to talk about that. You'll be asked about that, but there'll also be time for follow-up questions and other things we want to cover off in the interview, and there'll be time to cover off both. I also think as well that going back to what we talked about at the beginning is that I often hear producers of news programmes saying, well, you don't know what it's like. We get hassled all the time by the political parties, and Number 10 phoning up saying, you haven't done us justice, or this was wrong. I sort of feel, easy for me to say, but I just feel you should put the phone down on them and say, look, this is what we believe in, this is what we're going to do. There's a regulator you can go to if you don't like it, but don't interfere with the way we seek to produce the news within our remit.
You must be really disappointed that Dominic Cummings was found in contempt of Parliament, and there he is running the show.
Well, I said at the time when we held the debate in the House of Commons about the contempt motion that I think we have a very inadequate situation where I don't think there's enough real-world sanction for people that are found in contempt of the House. That is something Parliament is working on. For me, that process has been far too slow, but the Standards and Privileges Committee is working on it at the moment, and I think there should be some clear sanction for people that are found in contempt of Parliament, including whether they should be considered fit to hold public office.
Let's take a next question from Jane Muirhead. Jane Muirhead, your question, please.
Hi, Kirsty. Hi, panel. With the recent big-name departures from BBC Network commissioning, who's now looking out for the out-of-London indies, and what's the plan?
Patrick, Charlotte Moore at the very first Creative Cities Convention conference said that BBC was not going to do the kind of Big Bang Theory that Channel 4 had done, but actually it was going to grow commissioning out of London organically. But right now, two of your senior commissioners outside London, obviously Joe Street and Craig, have left. It's the Sahara.
Only temporarily. I mean, they have only just left. So in terms of what the next stage of that, in terms of what the ongoing conversation with indies out of London is going to be, then the plan is evolving, and there will be. I mean, Joe has been an extraordinary ambassador for the BBC. He's been brilliant for daytime. He's been brilliant for entertainment, and Craig, similarly. So we really need to build on the team and then use that as a way of engaging with the.
Yeah, but I think indies want to know how quickly that plan is going to happen, and where are these new senior commissioners going to come from?
Well, that's what we're working on. But it will happen soon because, 50% of our commissioning is out of London. The BBC is by far the biggest commissioner out of London, telling stories from outside London. I did the Creative Cities Convention this year and was able to talk about the different programmes that we commission for BBC, which are not just commissions that we have to make because we think, we need to commission from out of London. We want to be telling stories from around the UK. So hearing from producers, telling stories like This Farming Life, like Saving Lives at Sea, like Mountain Vets, they're all essential stories that are telling us what life is like in the wider UK.
But you're going to have to turbocharge to get back
Absolutely.
even to that position.
No, I think we're in a fantastic position. We have got a brilliant relationship with those indies, and we continue to have those discussions all the time across the different genres.
Tell me, Sarah, what's PACT's view with your PACT hat on in terms of out of London? And actually, are you shocked that The Guardian is reporting that very few senior Channel 4 execs will move to Leeds as part of the relocation?
I think the thing about out of London has been that it's about having commissioning editors out there who have the power to commission on their own and also spend money. Until they can spend money, commission returning series as opposed to one-offs, building sustainable bases in the out of London and the regions is very difficult. We do Hollyoaks in Liverpool. And that's enabled us to build a proper business out there, a sustainable base. People can work there. They know that they can go in at an entry level and work their way up through the business. And I think that's the thing that makes the difference. Just having one-off shows out in the regions isn't really helpful.
But what about the idea, which is being debated by Ofcom, and I want to come to Sharon on that producers need to have substantive existing bases before they qualify for nations and regions budgets?
I think that you have. I think Sharon, correct me. Did you've softened that a bit now, haven't you?
We have.
And it's not. You don't have to have a substantive base prior to starting.
Yeah.
You can do it on the first series, which I think is the right way of doing it. I think in PACT we've always thought that the criteria were all correct. I think it's how those criteria.
But that's interesting because that sort of means, this is the whole way that this has changed was to stop brass plating, one, and secondly, you get the chance of doing the series, so suddenly you set up an office. But what happens when that series ends? You might decamp, and that's the problem, isn't it, Sharon?
Yeah, it's interesting because as you know, we had proposed initially that there ought to be a substantive base exactly because of the concerns about brass plating. And we had a lot of pushback, not least from some of the newer, smaller independents saying that could be a prohibitive cost for them ahead of actually understanding whether they've got a programme and programme budget to come. So we've said, we're going to pause on this and then essentially see how the new rules play in practice. I think one extra point I'd like to add to this debate, as well as the sort of where people are based and effectiveness of the commissioning is actually what the representation and portrayal looks like on screen. And I think there is still, we did, a big review last year, particularly focused on the BBC, but looking at others. And there is still a lack of authentic portrayal. You know, it is, you know, the focus groups in Glasgow who say, well, every time there's a Glaswegian accent, why do they have to be drunk? Every time I see
Well, it's because they are.
That's one answer. I knew we should have concluded.
But no, this idea actually of even parachuting in, because actually on exactly to that point, people actually understand the cultural better if they're from that base place.
I completely agree, and I think this debate has got to be widened to how do we move beyond stereotyped, often well-intentioned, but stereotyped, superficial portrayal of
I completely agree with that. I think that it's essential that, I mean, that what we are working towards is documentaries, dramas that reflect real lives rather than some outsider's version of what that real life looks like. And when Ambulance on BBC One comes from Liverpool, or when Hospital comes from Liverpool, or when we do, you know, Our Cops in the North, which has recently been on BBC One, or The Mighty Red Car that was on BBC Two, that all of those pieces speak to local communities, but they also speak to national issues, but they're rooted very much within local communities. And you're not going to those places because you're just trying to tick a local box.
No.
What you're doing is you're making a documentary series which speaks to the issues and concerns of the people in those communities.
But you're still reliant as an independent producer producing that material locally, often on a commissioner who's not from that area, who actually probably doesn't actually really understand. And then, in fact, that means the Channel 4 model is going to try and sort that. And I wonder, Damian, if you think that needs to move faster. And actually, if you're going to create a proper, vibrant, creative cities economy, creative industries economy, you have to reconfigure where your commissioning is.
I think that's right. And that's why I'm quite excited about what Channel 4 are doing, and also that the solution wasn't just picking the whole company up and moving it to one city, which might have been great for that city, but not so good for the rest of the country, but to look at establishing creative hubs where commissioners are based, where local production companies can easily access them, and maybe in the case of Channel 4 to maybe combine that with some of the teams that look to invest in young production companies as well, to help them grow, and to have different hubs at key points around the country. I think it's a good thing. I think in some ways the fact Channel 4 have gone to Leeds rather than Manchester is good as well, because it spreads the centres of excellence around different parts of the country.
Luisa, you live in Birmingham.
Yeah.
Tell me what your pitching life is like.
It's very difficult to get anything made, and despite having I've got a ready-made audience, I've built my audience from scratch with little TV profile and little TV support, and the commissioners that I have met have been great. And listen, everyone loves London, of course we all want to live there, but a 3-bed in Zone 2 is quite expensive, so Birmingham it is for now. And the problem with living in Birmingham, as cool as it is I always have to go to London. So I work in London, I create in London, I do sell-out shows in London time and time and time again. I create an industry, like a little industry going on in there, but I can't economy there, but I can't afford to live there. And so talent's not getting paid, yet we're creating content all the time. And you guys are in a position to really support talent and actually put your money where your mouth is and give them commissions and give them jobs. It's very difficult to always have to travel to London. And it comes back to a wider problem of being like, if you don't come from a privileged position and you've had to work hard, blood, sweat and tears for everything that you've got, and you're not in a position where you can live rent-free in London with a family member to pursue an artistic career, then it's difficult to do. So you're trying to do as many things as possible, and then you have to move out to be able to afford to live, to then get the train that's like 90 quid or whatever, or 170 quid at night, because you lot as well. Can I just say one thing, commissioners in London, don't ask for a 9 a.m. meeting for somebody that doesn't live in London, because the ticket prices are expensive. They're like £170 to get in. And as an artist, sorry to go on, but as an artist, you're going, oh, I really want to impress this person, so I don't want to be late because I'm in the room, I'm finally in the room, great. And then
Patrick,
you're like, I can't afford it. I can't
No
afford
more
the
9
ticket price.
a.m. commissioning meetings.
I don't have any of those. Pleased to know.
No, but that's a perfectly reasonable position.
I'm just talking about access. People from around the country have to come to London.
I agree.
You have to bear in
They
mind
should
their
always
travel
be on
costs.
off-peak tickets.
I mean, it's something that I used to. I still live in Brighton. I used to work for a Brighton-based indie, and yes, it's not completely. It's not as far away as Birmingham. But if when I was working in the indie sector and a meeting was cancelled and you'd gone up to, you must be absolutely livid. I've never cancelled a meeting.
Never have. But Ben Fry said, I've only got 9 commissioners, 3 of them live in the regions, so that helps keep us grounded, not being West London up your arses. You could put that in your show.
It's not that funny.
Right, let's move on. And we have got a question now. And this is, absolute hot ticket subject. And the question comes from Lucy Hazard. Your question, please.
When it comes to long-term aftercare across all genres, who should foot the bill?
When it comes to long-term aftercare, who should foot the bill? And of course, we've got obviously the issue about Jeremy Kyle was canned, and then 2 separate, very sad stories of contestants committing suicide. Who should foot the bill? But before we do that, just coming back to you, Luisa, you're the talent. Just in terms of duty of care, what's your experience?
It's difficult for me to talk about because I don't want to get in trouble. And so then that's the problem, isn't it? That I don't feel protected enough to talk about things. So I had a situation where I did a show about politics and I had a meeting with a politician and it didn't go well. The meeting didn't go well at all. Afterwards, it was really surprising to me that the politician could call the Director General of the BBC, and then the next thing I know, I'm getting a phone call saying that I need to apologise to him for my behaviour, apparently, and that they can pull the programme. And then I'm like, hang on, who's looking after me here? And the channel is going, oh, it's a production company. The production company, we're trying to manage with the channel. And all these things, I just didn't realise the relationship. I didn't realise the influence that people could have like that. And then I felt as a talent, I was like, I'm trying to make a show to make politics accessible. And actually for me, the real politics is how come a channel can call or an MP can call a channel and suddenly I'm getting told, for me, that's a really interesting relationship that I didn't realise existed. And it was really disappointing.
And did you feel vulnerable?
Oh, I got annihilated afterwards. I got annihilated.
So, I mean, I'm not in any way questioning the veracity of that, but I think just in terms of detail, Patrick, you can't necessarily talk about individual areas, but do you think that artists themselves are supported enough by the broadcasters?
I think that the duty of care to artists is as important as duty of care to members of the public, in that the shift to, I mean, there's as you say, Kirsty, the details of your particular situation I'm not across. So
yeah, but everyone's always got. They're always like, oh, it's not because we're BBC, we have to be careful. No, it's not that.
It's more that there is a specific issue in terms of someone ringing up the BBC and trying to put undue influence on editorial, powers that be to try and stop something from happening. That's quite a.
But that can be the official line, but everybody knows. People know that how hard it is to get a commission. Producers know how difficult it is to get a commission.
Sure.
And if you've got one and you've finally got money, you're going to play the game a bit and jump through hoops in order to maintain that commission because everyone's just trying to get paid.
But then that is why it's key for that relationship with the commissioning editor, that the commissioning editor is looking out for the talent and asking those questions about who is looking after that.
I was looked up. My commissioners did everything in their power above and beyond their job to help me, but within the remit of what they had, they were pretty stuck. And it was just frustrating. I'm just giving you my experiences that as a talent, I felt thrown under a bus and there wasn't any support.
Right.
And it was amazing that an MP could say stuff about me, like he could go to the papers and say anything. And my advice was, well, get yourself a lawyer. Mate, you know what you're paying me. How am I going to afford a lawyer? Like,
that's an incredibly serious point. That is your experience. Damian, you're in the middle of an inquiry about the whole question of duty of care. Are you shocked, not only about Luisa's story, but what you've actually heard in the process of taking evidence? And that's not good if an MP can phone up the BBC and put pressure on.
Well, I think it absolutely chimes with some of the evidence we've received, which is that the member of the public who's in a reality show is actually quite powerless. They want to be on the programme. They've signed up to be on the programme. In doing that, they've signed their rights away. They've got no right over how they're represented. If they're unhappy with the way they've been treated and what's been recorded, they've got no right to stop it being broadcast. Or, as you said, go and get a lawyer. But people, that is not a realistic route and option. And therefore, it's right that we challenge, and ask questions about what is the duty of care, what policies do you have to protect the interest of a member of the public who's in an environment they're not used to, is potentially quite vulnerable, and has got no real redress for the way they're being treated.
But who should pay for it? But this is what India's is saying. I mean, sometimes it's beyond, there's not a line in the budget. And then as well as there not being a line in the budget, it may be that it's got a very long tail because obviously these programmes are maybe rebroadcast elsewhere. There's fresh duty of care issues come up. If we're going to be doing these kind of programmes, does that actually have to be properly budgeted for, or is it actually the broadcaster's responsibility?
Well, I think the production company does, certainly during the production phase, I think bears the responsibility. And actually, they're often not paying. They're not paying. I mean, what would be very interesting would be whether a member of the public, say, taking part in a show like Love Island, which is, committing to a protracted period of filming, should they actually be regarded as an artist? Should they be unionised? Should they have the same rights that an actor would have in that situation, which they don't have at all? And that's why I would say, well, actually, we should expect the production company should cover. If they're casting members of the public and not paying them, and those people are happy and willing to do it, then they should have some obligations to them throughout that process. And I think one of the things that we've seen during the inquiry so far is that I don't think people go into this at all in the production companies, seeking for bad things to happen or being ambivalent whether they do. But the standards are different. There are not common standards across the industry of how these things are managed and what's considered acceptable and not acceptable. And one of the things we've seen with the Ofcom code, for example, is that the BBC editorial guidelines regard adults as being vulnerable. Previously, we've only regarded vulnerability as being under 18s. And I think so. There needs to be some common standards and some common expectations for members of the public when they sign up to these shows of what they should expect and how they'll be treated.
Sarah, you make programmes. Who judges the vulnerability of people who take part in shows?
This is such a huge issue. I mean, duty of care covers an enormous range of issues that can, and inevitably it comes along as things go wrong. I think, having said that, we set every show up in the right way. We sit down, the production teams are the primary source. They sit down, they look at what the show is, and then we actually have clear guidelines as to how to operate on different shows. Is it a reality show where people are living together? If they are, we have to go and get CBS checks and all that kind of stuff. We have psych tests? We have all kinds of things. So I think there's a whole set of rules and processes that we go through, and you go through that process and you take expert advice on people's health and what have you. I think the situation with Luisa was different.
Yeah. But do you, just so for example, you imagine you're doing a reality show and you're casting your contestants.
Yeah.
Do you say to them personally, or does a production company say to them, okay, this is first going to be broadcast in 6 months' time, but it might also be broadcast in 20 years' time?
Well, it's unlikely to be broadcast in 20 years' time, but we do say, we are the ones who know what the show is. So we know what the content of that show is and where it's going to go and which channels commissioned it, and therefore roughly what time it's likely to go out and all of that kind of thing. And we absolutely tell the contestants what they can expect. Now, it's incredibly difficult with these shows because they've never done it before. It's a bit like trying to explain to someone what it's like being a parent when you've never been a parent. I mean, it's just actually the reality is different. So, but we do that, and then we have constant checks throughout the whole show at the end, and and some people need more care than others, and, it depends on individuals' own networks, all kinds of things.
I'm just going to say, Sharon, I'm going to tell you about a Channel 4 pilot. I'm sure you know about it. Train your baby like a dog. 25,000 people signed a petition for it not to air. It did air. What about the duty of care to children who can't sign their own duty of care document?
Yeah, I mean, the responsibility for duty of care lies properly and formally with the broadcaster. So whether that's the BBC or whether that's Channel 4. So whatever the relationship with the in-house or independent production.
So you say that's different. You have a different position from Damian.
So the formally, if you are a broadcaster in this country and you have a licence with the regulator to broadcast to UK audiences, you are ultimately responsible. Now, there's already, interestingly, we already have special roles, special guidance for minors, for the under 18s, because of the long-standing concern about people who in particular vulnerable circumstances.
But I mean, a baby isn't a vulnerable circumstances. Train my baby like a dog. I mean, what do you do about that? Channel 4, any execs here from Channel 4? Who commissioned that? I'd be very interested to know what the No, nobody's here. Train your baby like a dog. So the child is not going to know that that show is going to be shown in 3 years' time. When the child is 3, or a child's 5 years old and their friends at school, or perhaps got their mobile phones at the age of 5 going, oh my God, this was you.
So, and as I say, I think, you know, Channel 4 need to satisfy themselves that they are meeting their duty of care. And there are two aspects to this. It's both the care for the participants, as you say, it's really hard to see how on earth you get consent and all the rest of it, family consent for children that young. But one of the issues we found over recent years, particularly with reality TV, is that a lot of the harm has actually been for audiences at home. So we've had most of our complaints that we've had have been audiences at home thinking, oh my God, you know, I don't understand what I'm seeing on screen, and I don't understand what support has been put in place for people on screen. Because again, the broadcasters have not been clear enough about what the support systems are in place.
But you also, that in terms of
lights up, please.
Filming with children, filming with babies, consent for babies. I mean, we recently had a documentary about an extraordinary and very powerful film about conjoined twins. Yes. And of course, those young children were not able to consent to be in that documentary. Was it an important documentary to make? Did it handle that subject matter sensitively? Was it to the sort of greater public service good? And I think, yes, it answered all of those questions.
Would you have commissioned Train My Baby Like a Dog?
No. I mean, of course not. We wouldn't. I mean, we would commission childcare programs. We would commission programs that did, you know, engage with family dynamics and the sort of stresses and strains that parents might have with their children. But when you go into those family situations, then you have to treat them with an extraordinarily sort of nuanced approach. It is, I mean, to Damian's point earlier, it's not that going into the sort of out-and-out constructed reality shows. Contributors do have a right of redress. There is an agreement that you sign which has to describe what type of programme they're taking part in. And if that programme departs from that, then that's a cause for their redress. If the...
but who are their champions?
Their champions?
Yeah, if they're going for redress, to whom do they go for that redress?
Well, they come to the broadcaster. Yeah.
Well, let's get the audience's views on this, on the whole question of duty of care, who pays for it, whether or not it's audiences at home that are enough protected. I mean, it's interesting, Damian, I don't know if you're hearing about that in your inquiry. Questions on that, please? Nobody wants to have a question on duty of care? Yes, we do. Yep, thank you. And another one. Firstly, yep.
Hi, Chris Curtis from Broadcast. I listened to the duty of care panel earlier today, and I've listened to this panel, and people are saying very intelligent, very articulate, very interesting things about a really nuanced subject. But I'm still not totally clear. When a programme is commissioned, is there a specific budget line that says duty of care? And if not, should there be? That's my question.
All right, let's get that answer.
Anyone on the panel who can answer it.
Patrick.
So with particular documentaries that we might commission, then we might, you know, Claire Siller is sitting there, we might have a conversation quite early on saying this is going to have quite a protracted conversation, a protracted access arrangement with these individuals. So something like War in the Blood, that the filming of that extraordinary documentary was over a very long period of time. There was also a very, very careful, nuanced duty of care to the families involved in that film. And there was a budget line, or there was certainly extra money that was given to that commission in order to make sure.
But is it a clear budget line? Because, of course, when hard-pressed budgets come along, people are shifting money around to make sure that programmes are broadcast. Actually, because this is such an issue, should the broadcasters get ahead of DCMS? Should the broadcaster get ahead and say, in any programme that there's a possibility of vulnerability, there needs to be a budget line? And if it's fine that there is no duty of care issue, that budget line goes back.
I think there's always a duty of care issue. I think the issue is whether you're in a documentary or whether you're in a more constructed formatted space. With constructed formatted space, then, you know, I used to work with Sara making The Apprentice a long time ago, and there was a budget line in there for the house producer. The house producer's primary role in The Apprentice is to look after the contributors. They don't, you know, their role is not, well, it wasn't in my day, editorial. It was pastoral, and that individual was kept on over time and would be the person who then contacted the contributors as and when they came up to "you're fired."
Sara, what do you think about that?
Yes, there are. We have We have lines in our budgets for duty of care. So whether it's covering the cost of a psych, a doctor, whatever is necessary, then it's in the budget. And as Patrick says, we have a duty of care, I think, on every programme. It just depends in degrees as to what it is.
Let's take a question left on Coots.
I'm not sure it's exactly duty of care, but I've been making documentaries for years, and I'm amazed how there is no line in the budget mostly for just interviewing people. We use people in documentaries, we use their time, and they get paid ludicrously small amounts of money, if any at all. And I think that's bonkers, to be honest. I think it's very exploitative.
Well, Sarah.
Sorry, can I also make a point here, which is that, a lot of budgets these days, a lot of programmes are made on fixed price deals. And they're not all have budgets scrutinised to the nth degree. So I think there is, there's a responsibility with the broadcasters, there's also a responsibility with the production companies. And I think, at the end of the day, if we don't take the issue of duty of care seriously, we won't have people coming onto our shows. And I think that's an important point.
Damian, on the question of Jeremy Kyle, were you happy with ITV's response?
No, I think we were very concerned about some of the things that we saw. And I think it's about, for a particular format, and not all reality, it's a very wide genre. It's an easy label to use for a very wide genre of programming. But clearly something like Jeremy Kyle, I think, is very different from a documentary. There we've seen evidence so far that people, some people were being recruited, received targeted Facebook ads because they were known to be people who were interested in taking a DNA test or having a lie detection test to solve a problem in their life. A lot of people are quite vulnerable. They signed up to go onto the show. We didn't get any sense of, certainly with the lie detector test, how much they knew about the variance in the results. It's presented as fact. They can't stop it being broadcast. They've got no say over how it will be presented. They've got no redress after the programme. And we're talking about people that these are members of the public who may have felt that going on the show would help them in some way. But if it didn't work out like that, then it falls back on them. And I think certainly with programmes like that, dealing with complex issues and with often quite vulnerable people, there need to be much clearer guidelines, I think. And I think it needs to be clearer what obligations the companies have, and for the people taking part in the show, a clearer explanation of what they might go through. One other thing I think, just on the sort of Big Brother type format, Peter Bazalgette said when he gave evidence as part of the ITV session that he thought, looking back on the original Big Brother, there was a certain naivety to it compared to the shows now. And I think, I saw the duty of care session in this room earlier on, I do think the genre has changed because people have grown up with it, people have got used to it. There will be a lot of young people that see reality TV as a way of launching their careers. And I agree with executives who say there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, people may be going into these shows with certain expectations, and those expectations may not be met. And they may be willing to sign up to almost anything just to get on the programme.
Just before we move on, does that worry you, Sharon?
I think there are some particular issues. So when we're sort of developing guidelines, which I hope many in the room will contribute to, because we are also very conscious of protection, but also not sterilising, sort of creativity. I think there are some very particular issues which we haven't picked up today. One is actually the independence of some of the support experts, or whether those are the psychs or others, because particularly when you have a long-running series, there is a question about whether the psychs are actually become so close to the programme that they're not always providing the right support and independent support to contestants and participants. I think Damian's right. I think there are issues that just culturally...
And the other thing, I completely forgot about this, but actually staff working in these programmes who can be affected as well.
And you saw that with...
Can I just say before, I want to go straight out because I've just spotted one of the producers of Love Island, so let's just have a quick word.
Totally thrown me in it, thanks. Sara Tykiff, work at Line Pictures now, but I was at ITV for 10 years and brought back Love Island. But duty of care, we talk about it a lot, and there's loads. We should be delving into it, that's right. I disagree with you, it's not all under the production. It should be production and broadcaster working together. That's key, that's what we do. We talk a lot about a duty of care was really good in the last session, but what about the press, Damian? You're interested in what the press involvement is and how they behave. What are their checks and balances? Because I feel that that's not being looked at.
Damian?
Well, there are systems for redress for the press when they get things wrong in terms of the coverage of individuals. And
that story's gone out. So that story is there. it's then reported, it's on Twitter, it's on social, it is out there, and they can't get rid of that.
Yep.
And we
I mean, there can be, if you go through the press complaints mechanism, then stories can be removed that are online and taken down. That is part. And people.
Whose responsibility is it to work on behalf of the contestant or the applicant or whatever to do that? Because as Luisa is saying, these things take time, cost money, and as you're saying, it sits up there for ages.
Well, I suppose I think where there is an issue for the companies, I think making the programmes as well, is the result of the press story, a negative press story, is that something that the press have largely made up, or they've taken a totally unfair view on someone's behaviour and therefore in that case the press should be rightly criticised and forced to make redress? Or has that scenario come about as a way in which someone was presented in the way the show was put together, the way the show was edited? And actually was it irresponsible to portray somebody in that way? And I think that is equally part of the debate as well. I mean, one of the questions I have about Love Island, which is, people enjoy the show, people see it for what it is, a group of very, very good-looking, well-presented people in a house together. But
well, who'd never work for Westminster.
Well, no, but who exactly? It was very different in Westminster. But is that being presented? Are they being presented as members of the public? I mean, the current series, most of the people who were on Love Island were people from model agencies, people that were directly recruited. The members of the public who got recruited in the show was a relatively small percentage. A lot of these models know each other before they go on the show. Are we being presented? Is what the show is being presented as? Is that a fair representation of what it actually is?
Right. Let's move on now. We've got a chance for one more question. It comes from John McVeigh. Your question, please.
Hi, thank you very much. John McVeigh from PACT. Sorry, given the fascinating discussion we're having, this might be a bit more of a grubby business question.
You're the man.
I'm the man, yeah. So here goes then. What impact does the panel think that the BBC's plans for the iPlayer will have on production and distribution markets, and specifically co-production for the UK?
Thank you very much. Sharon, why on earth would any indie think this is going to be a good deal for them?
I spent sort of much of my life over the last few months has been sort of reaching resolution with the BBC on the iPlayer. And part of the complexity has been, we have been as concerned for obviously creating lots of public value for audiences, but also making sure that competitors like Channel 4 and ITV and others don't have their business models kind of impacted. I think as John knows better than me, I think the big issue now that the BBC has got the go-ahead on 12 months is now to enter into what I expect to be very hard-nosed, quite complicated discussions about rights, because otherwise it's the 12 months is a shell without content. And John, you and Sara, right at the coalface of this.
Patrick.
So, iPlayer is the future of British, in terms of the BBC and its relationship with the audience. That it's a fantastic resource. It's a place where we're seeing audience numbers grow. It's a place which has got a really strong relationship with the channels, working to iPlayer. They're not separate things anymore. It's the way in which people watch television. So we feel very, very strongly, and we're very pleased that we've been given the go-ahead, that 12 months is the way that we start responding to changing audience behaviour. You said earlier that I said that the audience was old on terrestrial television. What I also said yesterday, which you didn't mention, was that actually that there's a very, very big younger audience coming to the BBC and coming to our programmes in lots and lots of different ways, and iPlayer is absolutely key to that.
So what, indies have just got to suck it up, but they're not going to get any more money?
So
before they go
those negotiations are ongoing, so I'm not going to preempt those conversations in terms of...
Yeah,
let's have the
everybody wants you to, look.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to be involved in the negotiations anyway, so I'm just a very interested observer. But
Charlotte here?
But I think that it's not just for the BBC. It's not just to the advantage of the BBC. It's an massive advantage to the audience. But also, crucially, lots of producers, when we talk to them about extended iPlayer, are really keen to have their programmes up longer on iPlayer, because everyone knows that in such a competitive world, success is not just measured by an overnight measure. It's so with Mum, our new the final series of Mum, national treasure, piece of television, brilliant piece by Stefan Goloszewski. So that last series was day one box setted, and the overnights, if you look at it, looked like that the overnight, the not very many people were watching it. In terms of the 28-day iPlayer numbers, that 1.8 million people were watching that.
So it's incredibly valuable to the BBC.
No, it's extraordinarily valuable to the audience to be able to access the content in a way that means that it responds to their behaviour.
Very
rather
reasonable,
than,
Sara.
Do you know what? I totally agree with everything you said. But the big issue here is money, you know, which is that the BBC is a fantastic organisation. The iPlayer is a brilliant invention. And I think every independent acknowledges that and wants the BBC to be strong. But at the same time, you know, the terms of trade have stood this country in very good stead in terms of growing an independent sector, which is vibrant, which brings a huge choice to programming and employs an awful lot of people and contributes a lot to the GDP of the country. And at the same time, the BBC, I think, need to understand that they can have the iPlayer rights, but they need to negotiate them. And actually, to be honest, the negotiations aren't going terribly well. They are quite difficult. And they needn't be. I think there's a classic example here of the fact that John Max and I have done a deal with Channel 4 recently, and actually that deal enables Channel 4 to play out their programmes across all four, Channel 4, E4,
but that's a
More
very
4.
different.
No, wait, let me finish. And therefore, they can maximise the value of those programmes to them. And I think we're not saying the BBC can't do that. We're just saying we need to have a reasonable amount of money, because what it's doing is it's affecting the secondary market. And small independents get money from that secondary market.
But they don't get it now till 18 months?
Yeah, well, even then, actually, there's also a further issue, which is how the BBC are preparing to release the holdback after 12 months, which is primarily under 4 criteria. And the only thing that fits those 4 criteria is BritBox. So that means that it's not going to be a competitive market at that point either. So I think these are issues that we need to talk about, because we don't want to be unreasonable, and we won't be unreasonable about this, but we actually need it to be reasonable on the BBC.
It sounds like a job for ACAS.
So we could easily do it now.
I mean, are you being unreasonable, Patrick?
I think that I'm not preempting the negotiations, which, as Sara said, are ongoing.
And not going well.
Well, let's see what happens. I think the question is the reason I interjected is that the Channel 4 is a very different situation, because that is over the whole licence period that they are talking about. What the BBC is talking about is that 18-month holdback, which for the audience who have put a lot of licence fee payer money into these commissions, that suddenly then what happens is that the programme just disappears, and it disappears until the secondary rights kick in after 18 months, and then it will reappear somewhere else.
What's your experience of iPlayer?
It's fine. I just think you need to pay talent properly, because like I had a show like what Beyonce do, which was a hugely successful debut solo show, but I'm not TV famous. It didn't get nominated, but audiences frigging loved it. And for me, it was about having access to it, and it's frustrating for me seeing men get 10 male counterparts that are now household names, but how many women have to get through. That London is the first black woman to get nominated this year. You're not giving access or paying people properly to be able to do their job properly. I'm going to America that I've crowdfunded for my audience because I've got a fan base ready to watch a TV show.
Is your material on iPlayer?
It's on iPlayer. You're paying a very little bit of money to take my stuff and have it online for a very long time, and it's frustrating that you go, that's my livelihood right there, and you paid me 3 years ago, $5,000, thanks very much. That's frustrating, because that's how I pay my bills. So pay acts properly, put money into talent. Yeah.
Damian?
I think the thing that surprised me about 12-month iPlayer is when the whole debate about BritBox started. To me, it seemed like quite a simple process, which is that BBC commissions programmes, they go on the iPlayer free to watch for a period of time, then they come off, then they can either go on another platform, Amazon Prime, they'll go on Netflix, or they can go on BritBox, and that you pay, as a BBC licence fee payer, you get to watch BBC programmes live, you get to watch them on iPlayer for a repeat period after a time, and after that, just as in the old days, you'd have to have bought a DVD, then if you want to watch it again, you pay a subscription fee, and there's a platform to do that. I think the idea of locking those programmes in the iPlayer for 12 months, to me, seems like a very unattractive option for production companies, but,
We'll have to finish on that, but will we have a decision by this time next year?
I hope so.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you to our free and frank panel. Thank you very much indeed.